Alrighty, good evening, everyone. I'll wait for everybody to get seated, but for now, I'm Daniel Baer, and I'm an event facilitator here at McNally Robinson Booksellers. And before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are on Treaty 1 territory, and that the land on which we are gathered is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Aninawak, Anishinaabe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. In addition, McNally Robinson Booksellers itself rests on the land once occupied by the Métis community of Roostertown. We're gathered here tonight to celebrate the Winnipeg launch of How I Bend Into More by Tea Gerbeza. And featuring our special guest reader, Sarah Ens. Many thanks to Palimpsest Press for publishing this volume and making this evening a reality. Following the readings and a conversation with both authors, there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions. So if you are one of those here in person today, please raise your hand nice and high for me to see, just so I can come over with this wireless microphone so you can ask your question to be heard on the live stream. And not to make you pressured at all that we can't hear you, we can, just for the folks watching online. And I'll be back at the close of the event to read a signing procedure. And our first guest this evening, Sarah Ens, is a writer, editor, and book publicist based in Treaty 1 territory here in Winnipeg. She is the author of The World is Mostly Sky and Fly Away, which won the 2023 Relit Poetry Award. Please join me in welcoming Sarah Ens.
Well, I am beyond thrilled to have the honor of hosting Tea's Winnipeg launch for her brilliant new book, How I Bend Into More. As part of my hosting, Tea has asked me to read a little bit of my own poetry, so I've selected one poem from my first collection, one section from my second book, and then one new poem. Because so much of Tea's work is about friendship and healing and finding your way home, I tried to pick poems that were along that theme. So this is a poem called Communion. We turn to ritual, dyeing each other's hair in the bathrooms of the houses we house sit. We stain the counters, paint bruising the laminate. We do not make everything into a metaphor. Try knitting. Accumulating mildew and fruit flies, we drink from mason jars left under a full snow moon, push bare hands into gray slush and wash the car with it. A coyote running along the river stops to stare. How embarrassing, our howls are tilting to sky. We splash the pinups by the bathtub, collages we clipped from old Playboys and replace them, cut careful halos around their heads. We perform at parties and we nail the lifts. Often, we open our eyes at night to see someone kneeling by the nightstand or curled in the closet. They are crouched and confessing, they are denying, they are grinning with small, sharp teeth. Upon waking, we conjure probiotics, brew and ferment. We search the carpet for claws the cat has shed, place them points up under our pillows. We find a little dead bird on the windowsill, bury it in the tomato plant. We sit around on the kitchen floor. A box of red wine and mugs our mothers made. We tell each other some of what has happened to us. Something has happened to all of us. Our telling teaching us this. It helps to say it happened, to do this in remembrance. It helps to say, this body, this blood, to say, me too, me too. And then I'm gonna read from Fly Away, which is a long poem. This poem has, it follows a few different routes. So it tells the story of my Oma's forced migration from Ukraine to Manitoba during World War II. It also tries to grapple with how I came to call this place home, what settlement has done to this place and the people here, and what does it mean to call a place home? What called you home? What waits wild in the weeds for you, hooded and craning? What crawls you to the source? On my belly, I slide one careful strand of grass from the earth. Gentle, gentle, my father would coach, don't snap the root. I twist green in loops around my thumb, extract the pale thread seeking water and speak. The stem breaks, connection severed. I touch tongue to root, taste some lingering prayer, bite the soft end. And what did you call home? If it's sheer indulgence for flesh you crave, warbling in the woods, quaking shapes from soil, seek salvation elsewhere. Flat in dry dirt, under rolling shroud of sky, I feel for field notes, always unsure of what I am seeing. Wild geranium, lady slipper, bunch grass, blue stem, goldenrod, clover, cumulonimbus. Have you succumbed to despair? Coo and caw vagrant, your sorry burden lay bare. There, a new duet, a clutch and clatter of bills uplifting. If love hooked you talon first from flight, tangled you in free fall, you'd too submit to season, hatch full-sung hopes for here, here, here. High-bound, hawks still scratch out space in narrow field, rocky shore, park, garage, suburb, skyscraper. When I close my eyes, the black raven comes clean across the field, smashing nests half-built, abandoned. Cranes swing up condos, new bypasses bisect, already invading brome, buckthorn, Kentucky blue. Will you show the soles of your feet? Which death did you first heed? The clearing, scraping, scrubbing, the plowing under, prairie fire prevention, aspen and willow encroaching, or pollutants, power lines, pipelines seeping? How many bright shells did you crush, thin, cool, in the blue stem? I make out the moon mid-blink, afraid of what I still want. Vesper sparrow, lark sparrow, horned lark, bobolink, yellow rail, sandhill crane, northern flicker, upland sandpiper, short-eared owl. Will you study the span of your outstretched arms? Watch yourself wading out to your puffed chest, hovering hands above the swell, and know a river welling will bring everything up. So recollect each touch, each hatched plot, the taut net expanding far beyond your reach. What I still want, one long true story, good and true in the telling, to be absolved in the homecoming. These huddled birds as oracles, each year returning in great guiding clouds or pillars at night. Have you gone dormant? An exodus of self may occur after all your seeking, and this lost too a resting place. I'm sure I saw in dreams a dark house, an oak drowning, nests half built, a riven plain, unrelenting gale. Underneath, my Oma's voice. How do you speak? With conviction, with wrath? Turn from torpor, don't you know fierce mystery spins the undertow, so rise from your riverbed, slosh into shore, as though reborn, I slouch against a hollow. Nearby, sparrows cluster in the brush, tremble their tails, dig in the dust. But how to hear anything beyond my own mouth? A sparrow sings bright at dawn. She calls and listens and calls for response. So this third poem, I got married this summer, and this is a poem about getting married and this strange and wonderful process that was. It's called Wedding Poem, or Can She Have It All? You only get so many encounters with the sublime, the shop clerk said, clicking between two shades of beige. She meant it kindly, a soothing rationale for my bitter deliberation over wedding serviettes. Nothing like wedding planning to nourish a scarcity mindset, nothing like starving yourself for one big splurge. My auntie said the other day about her divorce that the older you get, the more you learn life is about change, and change is all loss. I think that might be true, that is probably true, though I'm still young enough to believe that there are things change can't take away. Like my wedding night, 3 a.m., the air still hot but not so heavy, my friends leading me to the lake, arms full with string lights, wet little frogs springing from under our toes, chatter of cottonwood leaves like sky laughing all over us, then tripping our way along the flood bank, a processional, a ceremony, a chorus of crickets and 8 women adrift, dropping our dresses in the sand, my white slip a shimmer on the shore, and running in under a sweaty smear of half moon, mud and river guts swirling, heaving ourselves onto the dock, our bare bodies a circle glowing in the wind. We bellowed love to each other, we really did. And that I know to be abundant and eternal. I know it, I have it all. So it is now my very great pleasure to introduce you to Tea Gerbeza. Tea is a queer disabled poet, writer, editor, and multimedia artist creating in Treaty 4 territory. She made my earrings. Her writing and artwork focus on themes of reclaiming disabled identity, the Bosnian diaspora, queer platonic friendships, and the complexities of pain. In 2022, Tea won the Ex-Puritans Austin Clarke Prize in Literary Excellence for Poetry, and she was a finalist for Palette Poetry's 2021 Emerging Poet Prize. When I think of my first meeting with Tea in the halls of the Arts Building at the University of Saskatchewan, where we were both MFA students, what I remember is that this bubbly, giggly, deeply enthusiastic person said to me, "Oh yay, I'm a poet too." And so a few days after that, we met in a coffee shop to do that very intimate thing that writers do, which is exchange in progress pieces of writing. And I don't remember the poem that I showed shyly to Tea, and I don't remember the poem she shyly showed to me, but I do remember joyfully leaving the coffee shop knowing that I just met someone who got it, who wanted to read and write and talk about poetry in the same way that I wanted to. And so to really cinch our friendship, I knew I had to go all out. So I wrote Tea a haiku about corgis. Yeah. Tea is a parent to 3 perfect little corgis, and that did the trick. So ever since then, I have been lucky enough to have Tea as a fierce supporter of my work, as a first reader of my poems, and as a thoughtful, curious, attentive writer whose words move, challenge, and inspire me. So please give a warm Winnipeg welcome to Tea.
I'm small. Thank you so much, Sarah, for that welcome. Communion is one of my favorite poems that you've written, and I remember when I first read that book, I literally taught that poem to anybody that would listen. And you know, Sarah is one of my greatest friends, and she's just so wonderful. And I'm so happy to be here with her, and her work has inspired a lot of this book. I even quote her in it. I'm really glad that my tactic of like, after a date, you would text that person and be like, we should hang out again. So I did that with Sarah, and she was like, yes. So yeah. I'm really delighted to be here and to see all of my friends and new people, and thank you all for coming. So this book is a long poem, so I'll be reading chunks of it. Sometimes it may not make sense because it's supposed to be read from cover to cover, so I guess you'll have to buy the book or borrow it from the library to read it. But I'll start at the beginning, I'll set you up, and then we'll move into some conversation. 9 a.m. on the 9th anniversary of my spinal fusion. Naked on my bed, whole body bent, scalene. 45 degrees, I measure my dark room. Eyes closed, my fingertips, my mirrors. Trace the crescent, overlap of skin over skin and unsolved space. Curling to child's pose, I lengthen, lean into parentheticals. My body's rotational dynamics, another language, wanting to be opened, to belong to me. I make a pact, use touch for answers, feel skin, even calloused patches shimmer, our stars flaking into air. How have I not noticed this before? My own quilled shape, a half moon. Papery edges, feet swollen, at my own pace, I build a circuitry for repair, for what my body remembers. How do I grasp what my body has to tell me? Big questions, big questions. Okay. Beginning. 1999, a walk-in clinic. 4 years after escape from Yugoslavian civil war. 4 years after confrontations with death. My parents believe my surgery worse than war. 2020. Visiting my parents, I explore my childhood home for memory relics. In the laundry room, my brace tucked away, I bring it out, sit brace at the table. When my father sees the plastic cocoon, this was always my headache. Daddy, it hurts, can I take off? The doctor listened to your breathing when he noticed, said to me, she has curve. Scoliometer. My hands in prayer touch my toes, see where my body goes hilly. Doc places my spinous process in meter's ridge, open-mouthed, up my rounded trunk. Enter my thoracic region, asymmetry of my rib hump is apex of C. Doc's pendulum with its tiny steel ball swings degrees away from my heart lung and towards C. My 80-degree curvature rotates my rib-caged spine. Cobb's perpendicular lines cross my superior end plate, my inferior end plate, to pierce away. My mother's hand rests, heavy, on my shoulder, the weight compresses spine. I hear my name, brace engulfs my whole torso, pushes against skin, against how I know myself, stops at my undeveloped breasts, imprints its shape onto memory. With 3 plastic Velcro straps, hold the device in place. Space between skin and plastic must be 2 fingers apart. Air is thick with words my mother doesn't understand that I must translate for her. Thermoplastic, change in apex of curve, prevent surgery. Words lost, she knows change, risk. Her daughter needs more air to live. I lay on steel, waiting to be opened, for spine to be untangled from lung. I'm gonna skip a little bit. Paper spine. So for those who know me, this is not a poem, this is me talking. I'm a paper quilling artist. I'm wearing a spine paper quilled necklace. And a lot of the book does have visuals of a paper spine being built, which looks very different than the one I'm wearing. So you can, I won't show the image because it's exciting. But that's something to look forward to. And so I play around with sort of the paper building is the sort of motif in the book of rebuilding the self. I make paper beads from strips scrolled S's and C's, string them on fishing wire. Together they hang like vertebrae around my neck. I fasten the wire breathing, the threaded vertebra bob. Softly I unclasp my spine, the paper ossifies. clearing up the question about my suffering. If suffering is private, then why should I explain? If I explain, do I start from my head to my toes? Unearthed misfit garden, muscle, grind, shoulder blade higher, asymmetric center, spasms, feather, weeds, lower back? If everything starts with my spine, then my spine is the root of my suffering. And if my spine is the root of my suffering, then someone can fix the problem. Remove the pieces. If someone removes my spine, then my core is ready for replacement. Rid me of my suffering. Pluck the white. Watch my column soar across the room. Hear it clatter, break form. If I'm rid of my suffering, then will I still be me? And then there's this image of a bunch of S and C scrolls. Hopefully online folks can see this. And on the top it says, from strips scrolled vertebral bodies. "3 p.m. Surgery in a week. Bees comfort, Slurpees from 7-Eleven, Pepsi, Dr. Pepper, strawberry Fruitopia, mixed maroon slush to share. We find ourselves at our old swings, sipping unsolvable spaces, throw our blue cups into sky, parentheses, spill on the rocks." Okay, I'm gonna read the surgery part and then the last little bit. And I'll read a little bit of the poem or the section that ends the book because I quote Sarah from it. Steps for making a paper rose or spinal fusion. When opened, cut 1 vertebrae off, 5 will be left. Remember to carve out a flap before snipping off excess. Take your bone folder and curl edges of the remaining bloom. Don't pull too hard or the paper will rip. Keep the fallen petals for the rose's core to make the center arc fold, tips toward heart. Place inside another, secure with 2 titanium rods to prevent losing one in a breeze. Prevent losing control, secure under paper flesh, to scroll center C, grip dowel hard between paper thumb and index. Move inward, a small blossom stacks well with others. In paused space between letters is another eye. Looped, looped, my chrysalis cracks. My chrysalis cracks. Sometimes when curling mid-blossom, petal rips, complicates the rest of the procedure. 16 hours in surgery, surgeon appears, tells my parents, there has been a complication with Tea's surgery, lost spinal cord signal. If you believe in God, pray she wakes up. Dragi Bože, pomozi joj, ona to nije zaslužila. All machines in the hospital, a collective beating heart. I told her everything would be okay. Daddy promised. And then we get a flat line. Code blue stills my chest. Defibrillation prisms lead me to awaken static between my revival and stillness. When hands insist my resuscitation, when excess refuses solution, when translation traces a flat line, I dream a yellow dress. Lace. Code blue beats. If you believe in God, pray she wakes up. I didn't see God, spun in yellow dress, endless circles, sewn bodily memory, cut up poems. Air carries pain, wake pushing pain chest, alive. Somewhere my father breathes. I'm so sorry, my girl. Somewhere, curled body petal, rips, wakes. The art of paper quilling. From the word filigree, fill green, like filling in earth, then filigree. Tiny threaded jewels, slotted seeds become quill. Narrow rounded folds, gathered to form ruff, gathered to cut feathers, form quilling. Now winding, the word mimics its action, a loop, a G, a backwards Q. Paper quilling requires gathering. Flesh mountains, hate walls, spinal cord signals, overlap skin over skin. Cut paper strips, roll, pinch, curls pieces into discs, heart scrolls, glue together, gather bodies into slotted tool. Roll tight or loose, always at the center, a small crinkle. Needle tool smooths inner walls, a tunnel to what is coiled beneath. Possibilities for cocooning are endless. Endless cocoons loop. Fragments of petals grow out of toothed metal. I favor the crimp tool. I want to do an aside because I think it's very funny. As a disabled crimp person, I accidentally had a typo there. It was like, I favor the crimp tool. I thought that was really funny. I was like, anyway. When I spool my strip, little valleys pour from its mouth, visible pieces of a skeleton, thoracic opening, body of the manubrium, angle of sternum, vertebral bodies, true ribs, false ribs, Venus groove, floating rib, body of sternum. You can use anything to roll paper strips as long as you have a good grasp on the end. I use a pointed wood rod to leave a large beginning. Strips can be stretched to any length, come from anything. My body a strip. Lately, I've been listening closer, how joyful to mold paper. Strips used to be sliced from gilded pages of books, hidden words foiled, decorated their own covers in gold metallic bodies. I fringe my poems into 3mm ribbons, wade through loose scrolls, star points, wishbones to see what brushes from, what already has a home in my body. The patient space between pain, lines of a quilled shape, cue a backwards G, quivers, gathers, 5-year-old self, braced 80 degrees self, surgery self, 45-degree post-op self, every self. A single S scroll is a seed, 50 a sapling. Plant C scrolls with tweezers, gentle, steady. Watch how a spine earth is filigreened from countless small pieces. How I bend into more. And usually I would stop there, but I do want to read one short part because I want to honor Sarah. 12 a.m. on the 9th anniversary of my spinal fusion. From Sarah's book, The World is Mostly Sky. I'm learning to sit still with what is in me and forgive myself for it. Repair begins with what my body remembers. My past belief, a mirror, a field guide to the self, reflection I needed to turn from. But no, watch, the kaleidoscope of I. Repair looks like this. And I'll stop there. Thank you. Yeah. Don't fall off. Is this on? Yes, I know.
I'm getting mixed. Okay, yes, mostly yes.
Yes. Okay.
Ariel seems to think it's absolutely not, but I'll just speak more directly into it. Okay, wow, Taya, I haven't actually heard you read from that much of it before, and it was like I got chills. It was really, really wonderful to hear it out loud. I was wondering if we could talk a little bit about the long poem form. We kind of, I think, fell in love with this form around the same time when we were doing our MFA, and we realized that a poem could just keep going. You don't have to stop, but you can just go and go and go.
Everything is a long poem.
Yeah. There are shorter poems and longer poems, that's it. And it was kind of this thrill that you could have a central question maybe, or a central idea, and just keep circling around and looking at it from different ways, and those kinds of like repetitions and circuitous, like returning to the beginning, going back to the ending, and looking at it at something from all angles is such an exciting thing for a poem to be able to do. Yeah, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about why you chose this form for this work, this idea.
Great question. Yeah, well, I found myself circling an idea for this book for a really long time before it was my MFA thesis. And I was trying to write discrete poems, and things just kept being repeated. And so I was like, am I just writing the same poem over and over again? And then I think I was talking to you, and you're like, well, I'm working on a long poem. And then you suggested I work with the amazing Jennifer Still, who's in the audience, who was my mentor, and she really helped me shape this book. And I'll always be in gratitude to you. And I realized through our many hours of talking and that actually this is one poem. And it was also Jen who helped me realize that the quilling is a poem too. And I was like, oh, wow, it is. So really I learned a lot, and sort of, because it is a poem about something, I can't say the word now, but it's something that happens over and over again, like chronic pain, and so I think it made sense to make it into a long poem, even though sometimes it tries to trick you because there's little headings, but those are just signposts.
Yeah, well, and you read, in your reading, I think there was a line that's something like trying to grasp what my body is trying to tell me. And there's so much about the grammar of pain, the grammar of the self, which can't necessarily be expressed through, I guess, like normal prose. And it kind of needs poetry, or even some of the visual elements that you include in the book to sort of communicate what is inexpressible, sort of. And yeah, I think it is a beautiful job of that. Could you talk a bit more about those visual elements that you included?
I'd love to. So there's a few different things in this book that are visual, and I showed a little bit during my reading, but there's, the text itself is very visual on the page. Some of the poems look like flower petals, which is reminiscent of paper roses that I was making. And then there's also, where is an example of this? Paper quilling. So this is a quilling comb with a strip of a line that's in the Art of Paper Quilling section that I read. And then these are the S and C scrolls that are that make up the spine later on. And the reason for those is that scoliosis curvatures are typically talked about through letter form. So I have an S curve, which is two curves in the spine, one on the top and one on the bottom. And then a C curve is one spinal curve. And so I was playing around with the idea that if two C's are hooked, they kind of look like an S. And so what I wanted to do with some of these visuals, and some of the pages have a vertical line, like a cut up line in the middle. It's a motif that goes through the whole book, and so it's a play on for you know, cutting, like if you're crafting, there's a cut line, but it's also maybe a fold line, it's also a spine, it's also a stitch, it's a suture. And so what I was trying to do with those is that uncommunicable pain that happens can be sort of embodied by those. And there's also pain in the book is defined to be periods, like the punctuation mark, and those show up everywhere. And so that sort of communicates the random moments of pain that sort of permeate my life. And then the other, like they're called scanographs, the visuals in the book, other than the few photographs that I have. They were made on my scanner. And what I envisioned there was that it was an X-ray machine. And so by making my own X-rays, I was starting to resist against a lot of the ableism I experienced in the medical system, and reimagine and reclaim that body away from that. And so those visuals really work to build a new self on my own terms. If you notice, like, there's a lot of repetition of my own pace, my own, what my body is telling me, rather than all those really ableist perceptions of myself and my selfhood that saturated a lot of my younger years.
So let's talk about the reclamation that you were just mentioning, like the title, How I Bend Into More, this like movement towards seeing yourself, taking kind of ownership, claiming yourself in sort of all that it is. Yeah, I guess I was wondering if you could talk about going back to that question of trying to grasp, what is my body trying to tell you? How do you think the book responds to that question? What is your body trying to tell you?
So many things. But no, well, I think that one of the goals for the book was to start realizing that a self without pain and scoliosis is never going to be possible. And thanks Tumblr.com for reminding me that my younger self always wanted to be rid of this condition, because I was so socially trained to think that I was abnormal, that my body was not desirable, and I took a lot of that to heart, and it took a really long time to dismantle those ideas. And so I think the body in this book is being like, I love you, girl, you know, and that was one of the hardest things for me to accept, and something that that sticks with me to this day was something that Jennifer still said to me while we were working on this project was, Tay, you have to learn to put yourself in the ending. And I did that, and it's a visual ending because one of my conditions, which is what this book is about, is scoliosis, is something that I can't really actually see every day because I have to like look at my back, and I have to contort my body in the mirror, and it's still, unless you have a camera, and that's a whole different thing. And so I don't look at myself every single day. And so by making this, the reader at the end, you know, look at myself, and my body is just like, yeah, look at this beautiful paper spine that is your spine, that is so cool.
Yeah. Another through line that's really interesting in the book is well, I guess another thing that I love about a long poem is that you can bring in other voices really easily, and that and you can almost kind of create these characters through the length of the project. And I was all the scenes with your parents are so moving, and you get these kind of haunting snippets of conversations when they're waiting for you to come out of surgery, and the doctors told them to pray, like, these kind of horrible nightmare moments for any parent. And then you also get little hints at their lives in Yugoslavia, and the experience of the Bosnian War, and a little bit even of the story of your birth. And I was wondering how you folded their voices into the story, and what their memories of war and that trauma, how did that like integrate into your sense of self, and why was that important to put in this book?
Yeah, thank you for that question. The book sort of started from that thing my parents said to me, is that my surgery was worse for them than the war, and I just couldn't comprehend that, because what I've heard from them is so horrific that I was like, to me, what you survived would very much be worse. And there's I think a whole other book unpacking that, but it was important to me to sort of like relate this bodily experience with some of the parts of their past, because my mom also loves to tell me that I was also there with her because she was pregnant with me. And so some of the places in the book where it is these moments where there's horrific violence done to her, and thinking about because like as a person, I've almost died a few times, like during birth, and I mean during this war, but then also during surgery, is like pronounced medically dead and then coming back from the dead. I guess I'm a zombie, sorry.
It's Easter themed.
Whoa. I'm a cyborg and a zombie. Okay, that should go in my bio. And our trauma, like, I've grown up around a lot of trauma, and I didn't want to put that on display in this book, but I think it very much shaped how I thought about my surgery specifically, and thinking about what they must have felt like, and just becoming attuned to that voice, and giving their feelings space. Like there's a scanograph in here that's made up of a letter or story my mom wrote. Maybe not a story, maybe an essay is a better word, where she wrote about her experience of the surgery. And I cut that up into strips and sort of made it into its own little poem or section or whatever. And it's in her voice. I didn't do anything other than just cut the strips up. And I think that really portrays how much she loves me, and how hard it was for her. And there's a lot of moments in the book where it's a lot of that tenderness that I didn't always notice. And so it's really important to display that tenderness, I think, because healing from that surgery, it shows that interdependence that is necessary. And one other thing I wanted to say about the multiple voices in the book that you pointed out, Sarah, there's this parallel voice that sometimes I imagined it as like this person that's like, hey, but what if you had a different body and beginning? And so part of what I wanted to do is have the option of this ableist voice being like, this other scar that doesn't exist but exists in this book, you know, offers me a beginning of us without S, or us without scoliosis. And I, as a speaker, say, no, I want this. And that was, I think, when I wrote those lines, I was like, okay, this is what the book is about. It's like, I don't like being in pain, but I don't know a self that isn't that. And I think there is something important to highlight there.
It is, I mean, the book, it kind of does read as a love story ultimately. Like, it is the love from friends and from your parents. There's a really beautiful moment where your mom is washing your back after the surgery. It's totally like, you'll weep. So beautiful. And yeah, the whole book, but then the ultimate love story is your own, you know, and it is this beautiful sort of culmination in like this, like standing in yourself and standing in like this self-love. It's really amazing. So thank you for writing this.
I mean, I think it's really important to resist that idea that a disabled body is not lovable and it's not desirable. And what I wanted to do is challenge that. And there's lots of moments in this book where the speaker is like, I want to do this, or takes their, you know, their own desire into her hands. And I like that you describe it as a love story, because yeah, I think I agree that it's like, I'm desiring myself. And I think that's a really important act of resistance.
Well, I think we can open it up to the floor with that.
We could yap forever.
Yeah. But if you have questions, I'm sure Teo will be glad to answer.
And if you don't, that's okay, no pressure. I'm sure Sarah will have more questions for me.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Beautiful book. It was so lovely to hold the whole thing together in my hands. I have two questions, but I'll start with my first one was, when you, in terms of composition, so when you are creating the quills, how much does that bring you to voice? It's such a physical act, and the book is about such physical subjects, and I'm just so curious, does it release you to voice, like in the motion of it, in the articulation of the strips?
Yes. Often I turn to quilling when I need to work something out, and I've noticed lately, because I'm percolating on an essay that I'm writing, and as I was weaving strips into these petal shapes, because quilling is really about building a shape. It's like teeny tiny shapes into another small shape, into a bigger shape, into something else. And so while I'm doing that, my mind is like free to move around, and then so sometimes lines will just come, and then I'll pause and like write it down. And for this book, it was once I figured out that the visuals that I was playing around with and creating were also the poem, that really illuminated for me that that the paper quilling is a voice in itself, and that I need to listen to it. And so I think I'm starting to develop a style of these paper-quilled poems. And sometimes I'll write on the strips and see, and then once I weave it into my quilling comb, it's a whole different entity. And sometimes that's really fun too. Thank you for that question.
Oh, thank you for the answer. It's beautiful. The second question is, you just recently launched in Regina, and I assume that your folks were there to celebrate. And after speaking about how you've incorporated their voices, how do they respond to this? It must be very, like, I could imagine it would be very emotional for them. And
yes,
yeah.
Well, my mom doesn't like to show her emotions. not to me, not to anyone except our massage therapist. Which is an ongoing joke. She goes to the same massage therapist as I do, and when I was last there, Casey, who's the therapist, was like, "Your mom was like telling me and bragging about your book, and she was crying." I was like, "She was crying?" Well, you're getting a whole different side of her. But my father is a very soft, emotional man, and the first thing he said to me after I was done reading was, "You made me cry." And yeah, I mean, I could tell, I could see him eating wagon wheels in the back. He loves wagon wheels, I don't know why, but there was this like moment where I took a pause and all I could hear was this like crinkling of him opening this wrapper. And so, yeah, he hasn't read the whole book because reading English is hard for him, and reading poetry, I think, is, he opened my book when I gave it to him. He's like, "Well, where are all the words?" I was like, "Well, it's poetry, Dad." He's like, "But where are the words?" I was like, yeah, it was really funny. But every time I read him a poem, and lately they've been a lot of poems about him, he'll cry. And my mom, yeah, I mean, I have to, she was like, "Well, after I understood it, then I had to read it again." I'm glad you read it. Yeah, so I imagine in private she, and this is me assuming, she probably, I hope that she felt the love that were in these poems. Thank you.
I don't know, but I'm assuming that English isn't your first language, or is it?
Well, that's a great question. And I'm having issues answering it because technically I'm bilingual, but I only know Croatian, Bosnian conversationally. And so I haven't studied, like I can't read full books in Bosnian. So a lot of what's in here is sort of written in the way that I would speak it with my parents. And I speak English more than Bosnian with them. So sometimes it'll be like Croatian and then random bits in English. But their first language isn't. I guess mine technically is English because I think in English, but yeah.
I'm just wondering how the syntax in the book might be affected by the Bosnian language.
Great question. I'm sure that someone in Bosnia might read the Bosnian and be like, "That's not how you would write it." Don't. But I treated it like I would writing English in order to just show the way that I understand the language. But there was moments where I would think about the Bosnian word for something and it would not fit with what I was trying to say, but it helped me characterize my parents, if that makes sense. And so, yeah, I think I need to think about Bosnian syntax more, but that also I need to learn it. Thank you for that question.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm very excited to read your book. I'm very fascinated by the multimodal aspect of it. And I was wondering if you were inspired by any multimodal poets or any other authors in the writing of the book, because I'm not too familiar with multimodal poetry like this. So I was just wondering if you had any inspirations.
Yeah, great question. I haven't, I don't have a poet that does exactly this, but Diana Nguyen is very formal and multimodal in her work, and she was really someone I looked toward for some of this. And I actually, for the visual part, I looked to visual artists for inspiration, like Laura Ferguson, and oh, I'm blanking on names now. Let me read my acknowledgements. Yeah, I'm sorry, Spencer. I'm blanking on some names, but I can definitely look for some names for you. But I also looked towards poets that were like Jennifer Still and Travis Chiwing Lau for their formal work on the page, and thought about, well, if this was an image with the text, what it might look like, because Travis's work was integral to this because he was the one that opened my mind to crip poetics, and how he was talking about how he was writing poems, and pain, when he would feel pain, he would put, I think he said, a slash wherever he felt it in the line, and so the pain was like dictating that line, and so things like that really informed the multimodal space. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Based on just what you mentioned about the slashes and then other poets' work, and you talked about the periods representing pain and stuff, could you speak to the other punctuation that you use, like brackets? You had a lot in your details.
Yeah, the parentheses. Oh, I love a parentheses. They are a long poem, I think. What I really liked about, so yeah, there's a lot of parentheticals used in the book, and sometimes it stands in for the brace, and it usually was used to sort of show the constricting nature of the brace. And other times I let the parentheses be in place of a letter, so like in the I, which I thought was clever. And other times I really liked leaving parentheses open as a sort of ongoingness. And part of the inspiration for some of that was Jillian Weiss, and her 3 lines that are the epigraph in my book. Sai says, "This is the spine, parentheses, a closing parenthetical. What did my body need to say as an aside?" And so that inspired a lot of that sort of unended or ongoingness of the parentheses and what it's trying to contain, but also what it can't contain. And then visually, the parentheses was all over the paper-quilled coils, the edges of them, and then I was thinking like, well, maybe like the part of my back that's humpy kind of looks like a little parentheses if you turn it this way. And so I really played around a lot with punctuation in here. So thank you for that insightful question.
Were there any other particular punctuation choices you'd like to say more about?
I think those 2 are the biggest ones, because I was like, I had other things going on, and then my editor was like, "I think that's too much." I was like, "I agree, it's getting confusing." So I stuck to the parentheses and the periods as punctuation that meant more. There's sometimes some slashes, but the slashes typically mean what they mean in punctuation rules, other than the one poem about, or the one part about the superior end plate, the anterior end plate. They were like supposed to visualize the end plates of the spine. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
We have time for another question, if anybody has one. All right. Thank you. And thank you again, Sarah and Tia. We're now going to move along to the signing portion of the evening. So feel free to approach the table to my right to have a book signed. And you may do so before paying for the book. Just make sure you do pay for it on the way out. And Yes, thank you once again for all of you joining us, to Palimpsest Press, and to our guests, Sarah Ens and Tea Gerbeza. Have a good night.
Show our sleeves. No.
Okay.
I can be around.
For sure. Yeah, sounds good, sounds good. And if you really good.
Hello. John. My partner's working. He's like, I finished grocery shopping.